to a special, unplanned episode of the PowerScore LSAT podcast. This is John Dinning, and I suppose the sensible place to begin is to explain exactly why this is a special episode. What's so special about it? First, to get a few obvious things out of the way, it's just me here. After 173, I think, episodes with a co-host, more on that in just a second, I'm doing this one solo. Second, no frills this evening. No episode theme song tonight, no LSAT world. I want to get right to the point in a hurry. All right, I do have a drink. I'm recording this at almost 2 a.m. because I want it to go out, well, I guess today, before our next big episode tomorrow. So I grabbed a glass and a bottle of Fortaleza tequila, and away we go. But why really am I recording an off-the-cuff, fully unscripted podcast episode by myself at 2 a.m.? Well, if you've been listening to recent podcast episodes, going back to probably the September LSAT recap or so, certainly the October test recap, which was our last episode, or if you watched either the October or November Crystal Ball webinars, you'll know that Dave Killoran, the founder of PowerScore, the original author of the LSAT Bibles, the long-suffering saint who's had to put up with me and my nonsense for those past 173 podcast episodes. As of about mid-October, Dave is on a long-term, very well-deserved, well-earned sabbatical from virtually all things LSAT, including this podcast. Don't worry, people keep asking, he's fine. There's no emergency or anything. This is totally his choice. Dave is a man of many interests, many skills and talents. While I don't know quite what he'll get up to, Dave might start a band, he might start a religion. I do know he won't be bored. He just wanted a breather. Spend some time with the family, travel, live life, eat, pray, love. I don't know. You get the idea. Now, at some point, I hope I may coax, or more likely trick, maybe blackmail. I don't want to play games of blackmail with Dave. I'll lose that. But at some point, I may be able to get him back here for an episode or two. I've long toyed, for instance, with the idea that I suspect people would be interested in hearing about his career in the LSAT prep field. He not only pioneered so much of it, he's also been basically the guy, the most prominent, most well-regarded, certainly the most consistently excellent person to ever do this. And it's not even close. So if he'd just let me interview him, maybe over a couple of episodes, that would be a once-ever chance to peek behind the curtain of this whole industry from the perspective of someone who in many ways created it. And if you want to apply some pressure, message me on Reddit or send an email to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com and demand a Dave career highlight reel in a future episode. He'll cave to that, I bet. Dave, buddy, if you're listening to this, you had to see that coming. I love you. I'm sorry. Regardless, it's safe to say that for at least the next year or so, this podcast is going to exist without him. I'm 4 minutes into this. I miss him already. But that fact, his absence, it got me thinking tonight. It got me thinking, what happens next? And that's what I want to talk to you about. It's a little like, you know that channel on the TV in a hotel room when you check in that's about the hotel? That's essentially this. It's a podcast episode about the podcast. And I want to do it, I think, in 2 simple parts. What's going to change and what's going to stay the same. Let me start with what's going to stay the same. You know, when Dave and I started this whole thing, at the very clever, it turns out, urging of our marketing team, shout out to Andrew, back in, January, I think, of 2019, Dave and I really had only 2 objectives. Although at the time they might have been more like misgivings, we wanted it to be useful, and we wanted it to be fun. Useful because, well, obviously, if we were going to put as much work into it as we quickly realized it would require, the only reason to do that was if people would first listen at all. And then second, presuming people did tune in, that when listening, get something out of it. And fun, partly because we thought listeners would appreciate it, but equally, maybe more importantly, we knew, knowing us, we knew that if we didn't enjoy ourselves, we wouldn't last 10 episodes. We'd get bored and we would quit. So those became the two pillars upon which we tried to build content and conversation. Will people find this worthwhile and get some return on their invested time? And can we find a way to amuse ourselves in the process? And look, we've been accused, and I will freely concede, that we have occasionally strayed maybe a bit too far or too long into that amuse ourselves field and just kind of frolicked a bit down some path on some stray tangent. God knows I'll chase something shiny into traffic. But on the whole, I'd like to think that we've mostly stayed on track and that we haven't sacrificed useful for too much self-indulgence, or at least not too often, I hope. And before we knew it, this obscure little afterthought of a bi-weekly chat turned into something far greater. On our end, we, for lack of a better phrase, really, we kind of fell in love with it, with the immediacy of the connection, of how some stray thought of ours could be yours in less than 24 hours. It was raw and unfiltered and fresh, of being able to compile your feedback and questions into student mailbag episodes and essentially correspond with you directly, of getting to let our hair down a bit, pour a drink, be ourselves. Well, heavily censored versions, but still. And above all, maybe convey the very genuine truth that this test, hell, this whole process, doesn't have to be the soul-crushing nightmare that sadly so many people mistakenly believe that it inevitably must be. It's not true. When you come to understand how this test actually works, what the test makers are really up to, it becomes a game you can win, and that's fun. Winning is fun. Mastery is fun. This podcast gave us the opportunity to demonstrate that in ways that we didn't fully anticipate early on, but that we quickly came to appreciate, even adore. And that shaped its trajectory, its evolution, and it continues to. And wouldn't you know it, we started to see that passion, that enthusiasm that we had, we started to see it reciprocated. I get several messages a week, many dozens really during test weeks, from people expressing that exact sentiment. You made me feel at ease. You showed me I can play with the test and beat it. I didn't know I could enjoy this. That's usually followed by like an asterisk or a caveat or something about I mean enjoy in an LSAT sense, but the sentiment is there. It became really something of a self-perpetuating feedback loop where every time we got the sense that we were doing something right, something useful, we couldn't wait to try even harder to do it again and to do it better. I suspect that's why one of the last listener tallies, that someone who actually pays attention to that sort of stuff around here, I don't, but the last one that they sent me was somewhere around 3 million unique listens to this crazy podcast so far. I would have never guessed it was that high, that number. It seems outrageous to me, but it goes to show that we're doing something right. So, when I think about what I want to carry over for this podcast going forward, when I think about the hill that I will die on for the sake of keeping things consistent, that's what it is. This will continue to be useful, arguably more so, as I'm about to explain, and I will try my absolute best to keep it fun. But some things will change. They have to. You can't have Dave here for 173 straight episodes and then lose him and think it'll go unnoticed. So let me tell you what I have in mind for the podcast 2.0. I just made that up. It's not an official name or anything. In fact, I kind of hate it. Let's just forget I called it that. For the next version of this thing going forward. And in my head, there's this kind of jumbled list. Most things in my head are jumbled. But I'm going to do this as a list of sorts in no particular order, but let's see if it maybe just orders itself naturally as these things spill out. Counting on you, Tequila. Help me out. In no particular order, here are some changes that I anticipate you will notice or that I at least intend to employ. And the first one comes down to hosts, maybe most obviously. My plan is to be here for each episode. Sometimes I'll be alone, like tonight. Hopefully not quite this late going forward. Sometimes I'll have a co-host. Sometimes, quite possibly, I'll have co-hosts, plural. This is going to depend on a lot of factors, from topic to scheduling and availability to, let's be honest, my mood, just what I feel like I can put up with. But expect a good mix of characters to start appearing here with me. The most frequent, I expect, will be PowerScore instructors. In fact, I've already discussed some of these hosting duties with a few instructors that you may be familiar with from our recent crystal balls. If you've come to those, you've noticed some guys in the chat, and some even on the mic. Jay Donnell and Adam Tyson, two of our most veteran instructors, both of whom are also world-class admissions experts. They have been in our crystal balls. They've been participating. You know their names if you've been there. These guys I've already talked to. They are excited to join in and participate. They will have a lot to offer. But the great news is we have a deep, deep roster of all-stars. So I'll be pulling in a wide variety of talent from our instructor pool. I'm also, and Dave is too, very fortunate to have a number of friends in this industry that on paper might be considered competitors, but whom I really respect. So much so, I'd gladly set aside any competitive stuff for the chance to chat with them for all of you. I'm not going to name any names just yet, but I've already had some preliminary discussions with people about this, and I'm very excited about some things that are shaping up, some collaborations that are shaping up. And, also very cool, students. I've gained some really remarkable insights over the years and frankly just been old-fashioned entertained by talking to people at various stages of the pre-law process, studying for the LSAT, post-test, applying, weighing offers, making final decisions as they start to hear back from schools. Really, you name it, there's very likely something to be learned from the experiences of others at your stage in the journey or possibly right ahead of it. So I'm going to occasionally put that on full display here as well. If that's something you listening to this might be interested in participating in, again, I gave you the email address before, LSAT podcast at powerscore.com. Let us know. Maybe you and I can chat down the road a bit and see if you'd be a good fit. I'm also lucky enough to still be in touch with a lot of former students, some of my former students even, who are now in law school. And I'm sure I could rope some of them back into the mix for a sit down if I asked real nicely. So expect at some point too, an early first-hand taste of law school life as part of future episodes as well. They'll be able to share some of their experiences as they're maybe a year or two ahead of where you are. Very cool. All right, so that's the voices, the people that'll be participating in this. Let's talk about content. I talked before, a few minutes ago, about maintaining a high bar when it comes to usefulness, and I meant it. I also alluded to the prospect that going forward we might be able to even escalate that usefulness a bit. I meant that too, and here's how. Dave and I, I'm just going to put this plainly. We sometimes found ourselves swapping our LSAT instructor hats for something more like LSAT reporter or journalist hats. Less conceptual, here's how to do this thing, how to solve it, and more factual. Here's the latest news from LSAC, or here's which reading comp section was scored. And the reason for that's pretty simple. You have to do the fact part. You can't just not talk about important LSAT developments or breaking news or test recaps. You have to. So if you're working with a limited amount of time, as Dave and I basically always were, those things went to the top of the list. Again, useful, but limited. So I'm looking to change that. Going forward, all of that's still going to get covered. It has to. But I'm going to dedicate more time, more episodes, to concepts, to strategies, to test content breakdowns with PowerScore methodologies applied. We're going to talk more about how to actually beat the test, while also still talking about what just happened, what just appeared on the latest version of it. How am I going to pull that off? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to do it with shorter episodes more often. I don't know the average episode length for the past 170 plus recordings, but I'm confident it's over 60 minutes. It's likely over 70. And listen, sometimes that's unavoidable. A test recap with 10 scored sections and another 4 experimentals and international tests. And look, if there's a novel's worth of content to get through, you just have to get through it. But as I pivot a bit, as I reshape things to start incorporating episodes focusing more on concepts and strategies, my goal, certainly my hope, is to aim for somewhere closer to 45 minutes and to release them on a more regular, call it 2-ish week schedule, rather than the 3+ week release timeline that's been more common lately. That should expose you to a greater variety of information more often in an easier to digest length. It'll also allow me to do more student mailbag episodes, something I love, since I won't feel this need to find 8 to 10 great questions and fill 60 to 70 minutes worth of time. I can do 5 questions for 40 minutes as a new normal. In short, it should give me more freedom and flexibility, and it should give you more consistent and manageable stream of content. So, that's what I foresee as the future of the PowerScore podcast. The motivating goals of usefulness and utility, the philosophy of fun that have guided us to this point, with a wider variety of new voices and perspectives, with greater emphasis on conceptual strategies and techniques, and content delivered more frequently, more concisely, to provide a better overall experience. There is no replacing Dave Killoran, but the plans I have in store for the next iteration of this crazy ride that we're on together are going to be something truly special, and I cannot wait for you to see it. Stay tuned. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.